Right. Welcome, everybody. Today we're speaking with Andrew McDonald. He's a breath work practitioner and also a brother of mine. Andrew, thanks for coming.
Yeah, Zach, thanks for having me.
How are things in Pittsburgh today?
Um, well, I was just telling you before our call, it's beautiful. It's sunny. We don't get too many of those days in Pittsburgh. Usually in the winter, it's just gray, overcast. Um, yeah, it just helps put a little bit of pep in your step.
Beautiful. Well, I don't want to take too much time out of your beautiful day, so let's get right into it. Yeah, what is it that you do?
So right now I am a oxygen advantage functional breathing instructor, if you want to call it that. That's what I'm trained to do. Um, so I coach people on breath work, and um, a lot of that has to do with, just the biochemistry and biomechanics around breathing. So correcting for breathing dysfunction in people, um, and then also using breath as a tool to be more grounded, be more connected to our heart, and yeah, be more in alignment with ourselves as a result.
Mm, beautiful, man. So, for those, like, I've dabbled in some breath work here and there, but to those who are first hearing about breath work, I would imagine that is like, what do you mean, Andrew? Like, breathing, I do breathing every day and I don't see any of those effects going on. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's I'd say 95% of being a breathwork coach is convincing other people that you exist, right? Because you're right, all of us can breathe, and all of us are breathing. But I think there's been a lot of changes in our lifestyle in the past, few hundred years or so, which have caused like very, very noticeable changes to our breathing patterns that
Mm,
we could improve. Um, no matter how good of a breather you think you are, like you can always be better. And for some people, that can be, pretty dramatic, right? They could be mouth breathers, chest breathers, people with like very significant breathing problems that can be corrected, or they could be people who are elite level athletes who can maybe get a little bit more out of their performance by learning how the breath works, how that interacts with our body, and how to take advantage of those mechanisms to work for us.
mm. Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. In terms of my experience, it's like kind of something that you don't realize quite how powerful it is until you bring awareness to it. Because it's like, yeah, we all have our way that we do it sort of like naturally, but I would even agree, I agree with you in terms of where like our environment and being in these like stressful situations all the time and all of this stimulation has kind of pushed us to this um, certain way of doing things which affects like really what was amazing when I started exploring it too, and you helped me do this as well, is just like how many different things it kind of affects.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of why I got involved in the Oxygen Advantage versus any other program, because I did a lot of exploration on breathwork when I started this journey. And the one kind of common denominator between most of these programs were they didn't tell you how it was actually impacting your body,
Mm,
right? They didn't really have an understanding of, what breath does what.
yeah.
Um, like there's you know, energy levels that you can tap into with breathing, but just leaving that as your only base of understanding, I think, is incomplete. And so I
Mm,
needed something that had a little bit more of that scientific background. And a lot of these concepts are things that we've known as a species for the last 100 years, right? But
mm.
just kind of casually ignored them because there are other things that seem more important. You know, everybody cares about what they're putting into their body, what they're consuming, how they're moving, right? But I don't know. You can go a long time, you can go your entire life without exercise. You can
Mm,
go a week without water. You can go a month without food. You can make it minutes without breathing. So it's definitely a super important thing that I'm trying to bring some more awareness to, and hopefully help a few people out along the way. That's my mission.
mm, beautiful. Well, I think it's funny because selling people breath like, oh, you just need to breathe differently, it's not like the most sexy thing. There's this tendency of wanting this like silver bullet that like changes everything, or some secret formula. And oftentimes it's like, oh, actually, if we focus on the fundamentals of some of these things, like some of these basic sort of technologies, I would even call it, that has kind of gotten lost. um, it's really amazing what is possible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it also helps to have like a good goal in mind and intentions in
Mm,
mind behind breath work, because there's so many different ways you can use it, right? You know, a very high percentage of the population has breathing dysfunction, and
mm,
so you know there's a very clear avenue of like taking somebody who has breathing dysfunction and making their breathing functional.
mm-hmm,
Um, and then there's, you know, other aspects to it that I'm more involved in, which is like the embodiment and this, you know, connecting with our body more than we're connected with our minds. And
mm,
I believe that, you know, we've created this disconnect between our body and our minds to the point where, you know, especially men, we kind of run everything in our head and push everything away, and then wonder why we're feeling so terrible all the time. Um, and I think the breath is a gateway to kind of go deeper and bring those things in.
mm. Yeah, totally. So like, what's the implication of, like, you touched on it a little bit in terms of like being stressed out and breathing shallow, but what's the big problem with just keeping on and doing it that way?
Yeah, 100%. So many of us, you know, we live in an anxious world. We live in a stressful world.
Hmm.
Um, so what this means to our bodies is we live in a very sympathetic nervous system activating world, right?
Mm,
Like our sympathetic nervous system, that's our fight or flight response. You know, it helps us be on point for a workout, for a big meeting, a presentation, a job interview, so many different things. The issue with not addressing the sympathetic and balancing it out is that you can quickly burn yourself out. So your sympathetic nervous system, it primarily runs off of a hormone called cortisol. I'm sure you're familiar. I'm sure all the listeners are familiar. That's the main stress hormone. And what it does is it primarily helps your body utilize glucose and metabolize it quickly in case you're in like a fight situation, right? Like we're a million years ago in the jungle trying to get away from a tiger. Like, you know, our muscles need to be ready to run. Blood flow needs to be pulled from organs that like aren't necessary just in case the fight doesn't go well. You don't want to bleed out. Um, and anyway, so staying too much in our sympathetic nervous system can ultimately lead to this burnout where our body desensitizes to cortisol. So we're producing it, but it's not going anywhere. We're not using it, which you know tends to lead to depression, tends to lead to weight gain, tends to lead to a whole bunch of adverse health impacts. Um, Whereas what I bring in is the balancing act to our autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic, right? And the parasympathetic is our rest and digest. It's what calms us, and we can take advantage of this through activating our vagus nerve, and our vagus nerve releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which tells the heart that it's time to relax, and it calms the body down. It helps reduce inflammation that might be out of control because your body's desensitized to cortisol, right? Um, and without that balance, you just go through life unbalanced, right? Constantly stressed. So we need to address that, and I think a very quick, accessible way to address it is through our breathing.
Yeah, I mean that I see as one of its huge strengths too, is that it's not this thing that requires a barrier to access. It's like everybody breathes, and so we have this tremendous power. It's just like the education is not out there in terms of like what it is helpful for and what the different types of breath are, because I think I've seen a lot of people who are interested in breathwork just kind of dive into it, and there's this sense of like, what I like about your approach is that it talks about kind of the nervous system pieces, and you're not just trying to blast through your nervous system to like achieve these results. Is kind of like about figuring out like the different ways that, because I see it almost like a gas pedal and the brakes, where you can do things to upregulate yourself, or you can do things to calm yourself back down. And there's applications for both, but it's like, if you're going into a breathwork situation and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to calm myself down, then maybe we should be doing the right type of techniques to make sure that that is happening.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's very important to understand, like I said, what these modalities are doing. Um, and initially when I started this work, I was very quick to like label certain modalities as bad,
Mm.
right? But I don't think there is a bad modality now. There's just, is it right for the situation? And to clarify, like for example, Wim Hof breath work. That's a very, very popular breath work that people do. Um, it's not a very good breath work if you're feeling anxious. It's a very sympathetic, activating, breath work, and it can take you from an anxious state to a more anxious state. It can just overload you and hype you up more. And I think it's very important to like understand the principles behind what breath does what, so that you can pick and choose. There's a quote that I absolutely love, and I'd say it's my guiding principle behind my work. And the quote goes something like, of methods there are, many; of principles there are few. A man who follows principles can choose his own methods. A man who ignores principles and chooses methods is going to have a problem. So, yeah, just like understanding those principles, and then kind of allowing you to go forth from there and explore and operate within those bands.
That makes sense. Well, and also just having a sense of awareness on like, okay, after I do this, how is this making me feel? And, it's like I've heard of people doing all kinds of crazy things with like passing out because they're doing these long breath holds and stuff like that. And I'm like, to me, that just, like rationally seems like it could be killing your brain cells and that kind, like it doesn't seem like, yeah, to me there's this tendency, especially amongst men, to just like push and push and push, and when there's actually sometimes we just need to slow the fuck down, so we're able to like become aware of what is going on and feel our feelings. So
1,000%. Yeah, I completely agree.
So what so also I know you are involved in men's work. That's how we met, is through brotherhood. But like what kind of like led you into this work of being into men's work and diving into the breath work thing? What inspired you?
Um, I feel like maybe this is a common thread that, everybody on this path shares, but I think the biggest inspiration or biggest catalyst was there was a point in my life where I asked the question like, what's wrong with me? And I think, whenever you start to ask that question, now you're seeking answers like, what's wrong with me? How do I fix this?
Mm,
Um, which is, yeah, that's kind of how I started with all of these modalities and things, was trying to fix myself, and then coming to a place of, instead of what's wrong with me, what's happened to me, and moving from that place to, instead of what's happened to me, what do I want it to be?
mm,
Um, and that's a journey that I've taken like through men's work. I think the primary catalyst whenever I chose to join ARCA, as shallow and silly as it seems, was I was trying to get back into the world of dating.
mm.
I hadn't been, hadn't been in a relationship for like 3 years. And one of the podcasts I was listening to was like, hey, if you want to be a more attractive man, join a fucking men's group. And that's why I jumped in. But the reason why I stay is because it's so important to have a community of people who witness you, who hold you and support you. And I've just noticed that there's so much more space in my life
Mm.
having that support, right? It's like things don't feel so scary to do, because you got 9 other guys that are going to have your back on Monday night's call. So yeah, that's kind of my long story of that.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, there's to me there's some kind of magic that's almost like hard to define that happens in group work, because I had a fair bit of like therapy and other kinds of things, but it was like um, there's something that happens in the group where you're able to witness other people's experiences while also being vulnerable with your experience, and then it's like, oh, all of a suddenly you go from, well, I went from, being like, oh, I'm the only person that feels like this, to being like, oh, wow, like, despite everybody being from these different circumstances and like backgrounds, and that we all have very similar sort of like core woundings around it all. So,
Yeah, no, I think one of the first things you learn is that like everybody has these wounds, but some people are capable of hiding them better than others. And
yeah.
there's a power in being able to see past that and see through that, and then take that to relating to others.
Well, there's all the, I mean, I feel authenticity has almost become a buzzword of like, oh, be authentic, but what does that really mean? And to me, it's like being able to show up as fully you, like with the awareness of the conditioning that's like trying to show up and prevent that process from unfolding. And yeah, it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to be honest, like not only with others but with yourself, in terms of taking responsibility um, for how you may be complicit in creating some of the problems that are that are going on in your life.
Yeah, no, and the authenticity piece, it's so hard to like put on a mask in that environment and be able to fool people.
Mm,
Because guys just, it doesn't take long for them to see right through you and
mm,
cut right through you and start peeling off the layers of that onion. And ultimately, it is that a way to go deeper with yourself, and to be able to express that truth that maybe something before was in your way, and you needed somebody else to shine light on that. I've been on this path for 3 years, and I've gone from you know addressing things in my dating life to addressing behaviors and like relationships with substances to deep inner work. I don't know. I don't know what the next one's going to be, but I'm sure it'll be just as juicy, and I'm looking forward to it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, what are some of the ways that your life has changed since you've found a group of men and also breath work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this might be a weird one, but I think one thing that like men's work has helped me with tremendously is like asking for help,
Mm,
right? Learning how to lean on other people and not try to do this mission, this life, this journey like solo.
mm,
Um, I think that was my MO for the first 28, 29 years of my life was just
mm,
lone wolf. I can handle everything. And like the reality is you can't. And even through this breathwork process, right? Like I'm constantly looking for teachers. I'm constantly like leaning on teachers for support,
yeah.
mentors for support. Like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in a lot of
Mm,
ways with all of my learnings and just understanding that. So I feel like my connection to humanity, like my own humanity and others' humanity, has grown so much deeper.
mm,
Um, which really opens up like a new level of experience, a new way to live life that feels safer, feels more grounded, and it's conducive to being able to take risks, you know?
mm,
Like I feel perfectly fine now just taking risks and failing and um, taking those necessary steps for growth that like in the past would have terrified me and I never would have confronted them.
mm.
I know we were talking today about this podcast, and I said there was some stuff coming up in my life where I was feeling really nervous about this,
Yeah.
and I did some breath work, gained some space and some clarity, and realized that I'd be out of alignment if I didn't jump on this call and do this today. And while there are parts of me that are afraid and terrified of being here, we're just gonna have to do this afraid.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think to me what I'm hearing is there's this sense of like being able to resource yourself through those difficult moments, and because it's like there's no really avoiding, we're not going to be able to avoid the difficult moments, and in fact there's a lot of like richness to be gained in those tough moments if we can learn how to show up and be more present and learn how to regulate ourselves and hold ourselves through. So I love the part though about kind of like surrendering, because I think there is this tendency, especially for men, to just like push and push and push, and that being able to receive and being able to relax and being able to trust in like a higher power, or just trust in that everything's gonna work out okay, is what I would say is seen as more like traditionally feminine traits, but I
Hmm.
think it's like such an important piece to achieve wholeness, whether you're like a man or a woman, or however you identify.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think a lot of the inner work that I've been doing lately, especially, and a lot of things around breath work, they are inherently, you know, feminine, in a way, and like that's okay. Like I think we all have that like spectrum within us, right? There's masculine and feminine in all of us, but I think that in order for that masculine component to put it in a David Data type language, go out and penetrate the world, like these things need to be addressed first, right? This is like kind of the foundation to come back to and be safe in taking those risks and pushing that comfort zone. Um, And yeah, like you said, a lot of surrendering to what is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, just I think when I first started, there was this belief that I had when I first started learning about polarity. There's this belief that I had that, oh, like if I am sensitive, like if I show up in my feminine, that will cancel out the like masculine, and so I just got to shut off one and then like just go into warrior mode. But now I feel like a more integrated approach is that there are different moments in our life that call for different things, and being able to actually embody an archetype, or whether it be the lover or the warrior fully in that moment. There's sometimes when you need to be able to be like no and fucking mean it. And then there's other times when like just even with like a feminine lover, it's like she needs to feel your sensitivity and your love and your openness as much as she needs to feel your like presence and direction and action for there to be like safety created.
Yeah, no, I love you brought that up. There was I can't remember the guy's name. He's an Australian guy. He's a magician, but also a motivational speaker.
Oh,
And
interesting.
he teaches people. He focuses on communication and kind of all the ways that we communicate that are nonverbal, right? Like
Mm,
the pitch of our voice, the melody of our voice, the expression on our face. And one thing he said that I thought was fascinating was when he's working with male clients in particular, it's really hard for them to express love.
mm.
So, when they tell their partner that they love them, it's like, I love you. That's really intense. That wasn't very loving at all. And
Yeah.
and then it's no wonder why the person on the other end is like, well, I don't really feel very loved right now because that
Mm,
that was very intense. So yeah, the connection
interesting.
is so important to make and keep.
Mm. Beautiful, man. Yeah. So, when was it that you decided that breath work was like something you like? How did you find out about breath work, and what led you to wanting to become certified?
Yeah, so I guess the clearest piece is this business that I've been working on for the past year. Um, it started with actually cold plunging. So
Mm,
I actually ran a cryotherapy studio a few years ago, and so I've been big into the cold exposure world. But last year I decided, fuck it, I'm going to try and build a cold plunge. I'm going to see if I can just build one,
mm,
a self-contained, not a deep freezer, but something like the bathtub that the company called The Plunge uses.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I built that. There's places around here that have saunas, but they're few and far between, and they're
Mm,
mostly like bathhouses. And so the idea had started to cook up in my mind, like, what if I started to put together a cold plunge sauna like contrast studio?
mm,
Um, and like I had the cold plunge building part down. I'm confident the sauna, the building is going to be a very straightforward process. But the other component to bring into this would be breath work.
mm,
And that's when I started to like explore it and dive into it. And James Nestor's book Breath was the first one that I started with, and it just kind of ballooned from there. It was just this exploration into different modalities, holotropic breathing, coherent breathing, um, things that are on totally opposite sides of the spectrum. Started to look into people who I could get taught from, and then I started to notice the pattern of like, well, maybe they don't know. They don't seem like they know a lot about what breathing is doing. And fortunately, I stumbled upon this guy named Patrick McEwen through a podcast, and he has the Oxygen Advantage program that I just got hooked on because like I said, it when it comes to cold plunging and saunas, right? Like I know so much about like what's going on in your body, like what the changes, like what the mechanisms that are being activated. And that's just kind of like my MO for life.
Mm.
I like to understand how things work.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and so same with breath work. And so fortunately, Patrick's program had it all spelled out that, this is when you breathe this way, this is what happens to your blood oxygen levels. This is what happens to your blood carbon dioxide levels. This is why they're important, right? Like just understanding the basics of those mechanisms, that's where I feel secure in and
Mm.
and being able to like take that and teach people, right? Because the worst thing in my mind is to not have, full understanding of how these things work and then potentially make things worse for somebody who I'd work with. Um,
Mm.
and just making sure that like I'm doing this in like a safe way and an effective way was is top priority in my life.
Beautiful. So you were saying there's the holotropic and I can't remember what the other one
Coherent.
you said coherent, but can you just like run us through some like different basic types of breath work and kind of like what it is and how it works and what are the different types and how does that all work?
Yeah, so I guess I would probably classify them as upregulating and downregulating.
Hmm.
So your upregulating breath is going to be things that are very fast, very charged, often through the mouth. So Wim Hof is a good example. That's an upregulating breath.
Mm.
Holotropic breathing, that's upregulating, but it's can also be like psychedelic. People use it for like having a psychedelic experience through breathing.
Yeah.
Um, and then there are, the down-regulating breaths. These are the ones that activate the parasympathetic nervous system. These are breaths that involve long exhalations or breath holds, because those are the two ways that you can activate your vagus nerve to activate your parasympathetic. Um, so
Mm.
that's generally like the two fields that I would classify them under.
Cool. Well, that's simpler than I thought it would be. So it is kind of like the gas and brake metaphor is kind of like works for it.
Yeah, and I mean we could get deeper too as to what's going on with your blood acidity levels
Hmm.
and the how your CO2 is being transported in those different modalities. But I think that's just a very simple way to look at it is that if you're doing something that's fast like hyperventilation breathing, that's going to activate your sympathetic nervous system. It's going to be more of that upcharging, ready to go kind of breath work. Whereas doing things that are slow, gentle, relaxed, focusing on breath holds, focusing on exhalation, that's going to calm you down and bring you back into a grounded state.
Mm.
And there's probably hundreds of different modalities that I don't even know that
Yeah,
could fit into either band of that spectrum.
totally. So I feel like to me the down regulating one is pretty clear in terms of like how that could be beneficial because we're a lot of us in this modern world are just like grinding it out and pushing and to be able to have a lever to pull to be like okay we're gonna like calm ourselves down and be able to be more grounded but like what would be some of the benefits of the opposite of the upregulating like what would be some of the situations that would be appropriate for that type of breath.
Well, I think that in the same way that an overactive sympathetic nervous system can be problematic, an overactive parasympathetic nervous system could be problematic. And I
Yeah.
actually, I gave my first breathwork speech last week, and this is kind of what I was talking about was, if I was just up here on stage fully in my parasympathetic, this would probably be a shitty speech, right?
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
because I wouldn't care. Whatever. Like, I'm relaxed. I'm chill. Um, I mean, I don't know what you're drinking in your mug right now, but I'm guessing it's something caffeinated.
Tea, yeah, tea.
Yeah, yeah. So we're always there are times where we're always looking for like that a bit of a boost. And so some upregulating breath work can be good for that.
Well, and stress, I feel like we have this idea that stress is like a bad thing, but I feel like it can actually be beneficial as well. And like, so, I'm a musician, and part of what makes a good performance is feeling the anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm performing, and being able to like translate that energy into excitement and like emotion, and playing, your song to the fullest. So, yeah, just reframe on stress there, where it's not so much just universally bad as like useful, but in particular doses and in particular situations.
Yeah, no, and I think that kind of aligns with the philosophy that too much of anything is a bad thing.
Hmm.
Right? Like, there's certainly you need stress to some degree. We probably couldn't live without it. When you go work out, like you're putting your muscles under stress to, you know, adapt to it. Our
Hmm.
body's like super capable of being able to adapt to stressful situations. But at the same time, there's so much of it out there. There's so many things that people probably give their energy to that maybe they shouldn't,
Mm.
but they exist, and that's the world that we live in. And so it just tends to be that we get stress in too high of doses.
Hmm.
Especially like emotional stress.
I would imagine too the quality of the stress like almost makes a difference. Where like, are you getting it from cold plunging, or are you like, watching a horror movie that's like freaking you out, or are you like flipping through, even just like sometimes being an informed citizen these days means like subjecting yourself to all this war imagery, and it's like, whoa, that's like, uh, yeah, just wondering what the effect that's having on all of our nervous systems.
Yeah, no, we live in a world that's constantly stimulating, and this brings about changes to our breath and our breathing too, right? So when we're stressed out, we're generally not breathing deep. We're not breathing like into the lower portion of our lungs. We're
Mm-hmm.
breathing into our upper chest. We're breathing very shallow. We're breathing faster. So we're losing a lot of carbon dioxide, which also means that our blood isn't able to transmit oxygen to the places that need it, and that continues to contribute to our stress. So the breath stress connection can kind of create this vicious cycle. But the easiest way to break it is control of the breath.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. So just a little personal aside, because we talked to Andrew for to do a session for me, and we talked about this in our session a bit. But I used to have sleep apnea, and that's essentially um, caused from not being able to breathe at night and snoring, and just I have found over time, and becoming more aware of my breath, and just this all the other work that I've done, just there's a profound difference from learning to breathe into your belly, or lower, they in in my like tai chi kung fu practice, they call it the lower dantian, where there's this belief that there's this seat of energy there.
Mm,
And so learning how to breathe, and even like speaking, the conversations that I have from this place are always more connective than the sort of like when I'm short of breath and running around everywhere, and everything is stressed out. Like there's a different quality of energy that I'm putting out when I'm in that space. And I'd say I'm even like only able to access like certain mental pathways too, because I'm just like kind of in like freeze mode. freeze and
Yeah,
react.
and part of that could be, like I said, when we're stressed, when we're breathing fast, we're losing a lot of carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide plays a really important role in our blood. It helps regulate the pH balance of our blood.
Mm,
And why this is important is because your hemoglobin needs to be at a certain pH level in order for oxygen to release. And if you don't have enough carbon dioxide, it becomes very difficult for oxygen to release.
mm,
And so what happens is the actual neurons and cells in your brain become very excitable
mm,
when they're lacking oxygen. And it kind of plays out in the same way that like anxiety or stress does, where like you're bouncing around everywhere, trying to get control of the situation. Your neurons, your cells are literally doing that, like just trying to get oxygen. Um,
mm.
so it's important to yeah, just to be able to take control of your breathing so that you can help regulate that and get you out of that pattern when you're in it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Like there was back when I was first doing men's work, somebody said that like my power animal was a squirrel. So I was like, definitely the overthinking thing has been a pattern of mine. So beautiful.
And were you like, did you still struggle with sleep apnea when whoever called you out said that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and then maybe there was something to that, like the apnea, because that, it's the big problem with sleep apnea, right? Is like you're cutting off oxygen, and that's pretty terrible and often deadly.
yeah, for sure. Well, and I think some of it, like um, I have actually healed it now, and I think part of that has been through like diet and exercise and weight and the reducing of inflammation that comes with that. But I also think part of it was definitely mental as well, because it wasn't so much that my airway was being clogged as I would just like hold my breath.
Hmm.
Um, and so like people were like, like my partner would like shake me awake and be like, Zach, you're not breathing. So it's like it's interesting though that like becoming more embodied and like I feel like has helped that just tremendously.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what embodiment can do just to your life in general. Things have been flowing in my life so much more, even at times feeling like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. But
Mm,
the more I lean into this embodiment work, the more space I feel like I have.
mm.
Um,
Beautiful, man. Well, for the listeners, like do you have any like tools that you could give in terms of like techniques um for like how to start playing around with this, or like how do you get started?
um, yeah, that's a good question. So I think this program is very much an individual approach. Everybody has unique needs, but it's something that, it's an easy place to start is just how do you breathe when you sleep?
Mm,
Um, so, if you're the type of person who is waking up with a dry mouth, you are waking up thirsty, you're waking up with a lot of, not a lot of energy, you're yawning a lot throughout the day, chances are you're breathing through your mouth for the 6 to 8 hours that you're asleep. And that's
mm,
like, a third of your life, you're breathing through your mouth. Um, so that's usually the start with a lot of people is correcting for that. Mouth taping, that's definitely a big thing right now. I know I've been blasted with the hostage tape advertisements for the past year. Um, but it works. It's something that was what helped kickstart my journey was like just noticing the difference between sleeping with my mouth closed
mm,
and sleeping with my mouth open. Um, and there's, tremendous downstream effects as far as like inflammation in the airways is lower when you're breathing through your nose, right? Because the air coming through your nose is humidified.
Mm,
whereas coming through your mouth, it's dry, which can be inflaming to your airways and can then like lead to congestion in your nose. It can make it very hard to even breathe through your nose.
mm,
Um, so that's definitely the place that I would start. And the other tool that I think is very accessible is just coherent breathing. So that's a breath protocol, which is a 6 second inhale followed by a 6 second exhale, all through the nose. There's timers available on YouTube, on Insight Timer. Hopefully soon I will have my timer available on the internet so people
mm,
can work with that. But that is probably the most powerful breath modality that I know at the moment.
mm.
Um, it doesn't take much, 8 to 10 minutes. If you want to sit longer, you can go for 20, but 8 to 10 minutes is a great starting point. It's the most powerful breath that we know as far as for HRV optimization, so your heart rate variability,
Mm.
which is an indicator of your nervous system's health. Um, so yeah, if I 2 pointers that people can take away from today: make sure you're breathing through your nose at night, and do coherent breathing 2 to 3 times a week.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for just like giving some tools. Oh, I remember where I was gonna go with it. Just like after we had our session, because I have a puppy and he needs a lot of exercise, so I take him for a couple walks slash runs a day, and I've been playing around with, breathing through my nose, and I actually found that I was like less stressed out at the end of the workout, like, and and feeling like more grounded, and like it had kind of like taken less out of me, if that makes sense. um just like, I'm not doing crazy strenuous exercise or anything, but I just from that little 20-30 minute uh jog, it seems like there is even a noticeable difference between the more breathing, taking in breath through the mouth, and breathing in through the nose.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for one, breathing through the nose is just so much more efficient from like an energy perspective.
Mm,
Um, you tend to breathe deeper breathing through your nose, which when you're standing upright, most of the blood in your lungs is down in the lower chambers. So it's better for the gas exchange to be able to breathe deep into the lower lobes of your lungs.
mm,
And it's better for maintaining the O2 CO2 balance in your lungs too. Like I said, if you don't have enough carbon dioxide, your oxygen deliverability is like significantly diminished,
mm,
which when you're working out and you're huffing and puffing through your mouth, that's going to make you tire out faster. So
mm,
breathing through your nose is super important, and for many of us, we've forgotten.
mm,
It's one of the cultural things I feel like we've forgotten.
mm. Beautiful. Yeah, you were telling me during our meeting that in just like in different cultures, that there would be part of like raising somebody to adulthood would be actually teaching them how to breathe. And like, with the nursing infant, if they noticed that they were breathing through their you know mouth, that they would like close their mouth, and that this was much more a part of like almost common knowledge and common usage, you know in different cultures.
Yeah, and there's still, cultures that exist like that. I don't know which ones they are, but I've heard of people or tribes that they'll hunt gazelle and they'll do it entirely on foot.
Mm,
And the gazelle gets tired before they get tired.
mm,
And they never breathe through their mouth, which is pretty wild to chase down a gazelle on foot to the point where you tire it out.
mm,
Um, It's
It's interesting because like being more connected to our ancestors and how we used to do things, it's like even being able to breathe through your nose as a hunt, thinking about stalking and hunting animals. It's like being able to breathe in a calm and slow and like undetectable way would have huge implications for like not only your survival but your family or tribes survival. So
yeah.
yeah, interesting, man. Well, yeah, for people interested in learning more about you or breath, like what do you got? Where can they go? Like what are some resources to check out?
Well, you can definitely check out The Oxygen Advantage. There's a great book that you can learn all these modalities and the intricacies about breathing. Um, he Patrick McEwen, great guy. He seems like he's really, really passionate about this work and not looking to charge people to death.
Mm.
He's not a grifter. Um, for myself right now, you can just find me on Instagram at Andy G Mac, MACK. Working on getting my website up and running, working on getting my business Instagram up and running. But yeah, this I'm working with people faster than I'm able to like work on like the marketing side of it. So
And that's a good sign.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I can just to give a little plug for you. Like I worked with you, and I've done other things in the past, which have been more like big psychedelic, like holotropic experiences. And there's a lot of great things about that as well. But what I really enjoyed about us our session was just being able to immediately drop into some practical tools and applications to be like, okay, when you're feeling like this, do this. And yeah, I just found that to be sometimes as coaches or mentors, we have the tendency of wanting to like have this big transformational experience, and I think what is sometimes less sexy but more impactful is being able to do little things that you can implement uh every day, or in that moment when you need it the most. So that's what I really appreciated about our session.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, and that's my goal too is life is life, right? We all have jobs, we have responsibilities. A lot of us have kids, a lot of us we have cats.
We have cats
It's,
climbing on us.
we have so many things competing for our attention. So to be able to,
I definitely know that one.
I'm so jealous of your animals, by the way. They seem in love with you. But yeah, just making things practical, digestible. You can do a lot of these things in like snacks, breathwork snacks,
Mm,
which the more that these things can fit um, everybody's lifestyle, I think the more compliance that they'd have as well. Oh,
mm. Awesome, man. I love that. Well, is there any other words of wisdom that you'd like to impart before we close things up?
I'm not a words of wisdom
Like
person.
you got the wrong guy.
Yeah, it was the wrong podcast. No, man, the only thing I want to say is thank you so much for like setting up, giving me an opportunity to come on and talk about this, and ultimately even giving me an opportunity to like I said, step into this with some fear
Mm,
and find that safety in myself. I think that's always great practice. But
mm.
I really appreciate you doing this and giving me the chance to speak about it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on here. Imposter syndrome is something that we all have. And my dad was a musician, and back in the 80s he played for some Stephen King parties. And it's like Stephen King is a prime example because he's written a lot about his own imposter syndrome. And I'm like, if you're Stephen King and you're having imposter syndrome, it's like, it's just part of the human experience. No matter how far we've like made it, there's always going to be that sense of like, oh my God, it's almost like a primal sensibility that we have of like, do we belong here or do we not belong here? And I just want to recognize you for being aware of that and showing up anyways, because I do believe that that's really the only way that we can confront it. You can't solve it by doing more stuff on the back end. There's some point where it's just like the only way that things can be resolved is as the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So
Yeah, the only path forward is through. I will say I do have one little word of wisdom. It's around the imposter syndrome that I found very helpful when I step into those situations where I feel like I don't belong. Whatever it is that's kind of making you feel that way, whatever idea that is, call it out. Call it out. I'm a burgeoning breathwork coach, and I'm not an expert. So, that's it. That's what makes me feel like an imposter. Just saying that, like I can take ownership of it and move forward from here.
Beautiful. I mean, there's enough people trying, like, pretending to be experts out in the world. So to me, it feels so refreshing to be like, I don't really know 100%, but I'm here in full presence and I'm going to do my best. So, thank you for that little nugget of wisdom. And thanks for giving me your time and energy. And thanks for tuning in, everybody who's listening. And until next time.